Republican Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska, he is a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Sir, you had multiple tweets and retweets fact-checking President Trump's false claims that Zelensky is a dictator and that Ukraine started this war. What is your worry about the president echoing Russian propaganda?
Well, the president needs a do-over day and start again. He took a bad turn. I think what he said is wrong. And it's a shame. I think many Republicans, I'm not saying all, but many Republicans know what the president said today was wrong. Putin started this invasion. He is the dictator. He has killed all of his opponents. Zelensky was rightfully elected. He is under martial law, and they have under their constitution that they can postpone their elections while under martial law. Ukraine is the victim. And I would ask that our president stand on the side of freedom, the side of democracy, the side of the victim, not the invader, and stick up for what's right. And so I wanted to be very strong in my words today because this Republican does not agree with what the president said.
You're seeing a bit of a pile-on here. Elon Musk, Don Jr., Laura Loomer, really so much of the MAGA base jumping on Zelensky. Zelensky said this morning, as we mentioned, that Trump lives in this disinformation space. The vice president called that from Zelensky disgraceful. He said, quote, "Everyone who knows the president will tell you that is an atrocious way to deal with this administration." Should Zelensky have handled this differently, what he said?
I think he handled it tactfully. You have to push back. He is the victim. Putin is the invader. Putin's bombing of cities. Russians are obliterating the towns that they have taken over, and they've assassinated or murdered prisoners of war. They've raped and pillaged. Russia's on the bad side here, and we need a president that has moral clarity when it comes to this war. And I right now don't see that. I had hoped the president would step up and be better than Joe Biden. I felt like Joe Biden was slow in getting weapons there. He was using rules of engagement that restricted Ukraine. It was really feeding the gridlock. Now I had hoped that this president would step up and try to finish this war in the right way, not in an unnoble way. And this what we see today is not a noble course of action. We're standing on the side of the dictator, not the side of democracy.
Speaking of Trump's affinity for strong men, right now he's set to speak at an investment conference in Miami, backed by the sovereign wealth fund of another autocratic regime, the government of Saudi Arabia. It's where we start the hour with Michigan Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin. She's a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, and a former analyst at the CIA. I want to call on that third area of expertise, which you bring so skillfully to your role as a senator, and ask you what's happening right now in Ukraine. What are they having to do based on Donald Trump's public statements?
Yeah, well, look, I was just at the Munich Security Conference, and our bipartisan delegation met with Zelensky. We obviously watched the J.D. Vance speech live. I think right now, the Ukrainians who have been fighting, who have been trying to hold off the invasion of their country, are looking around the world and saying that the United States, the country that since World War II has been on the side of democracies, is now not only just maybe walking away, but actually siding with the aggressor, with the autocratic regime. I can't overstate how different this is in the post-World War II America. And I think Ronald Reagan must be rolling over in his grave right now to watch a Republican administration, after all he did to help us win the Cold War, now not only sort of supporting Putin's position at the table, but just sort of gushing over him in this bromance that they have. So it's a really disturbing day because it will have impacts on international security and on the security of the United States, full stop.
Can you explain that to us? How does that impact our ability to protect ourselves? How does that impact intelligence sharing? How does that impact what our allies will share with us?
Sure. Well, it certainly, I think, makes them hedge. And we saw that in Europe this past week. Again, the European leaders were like, look, we usually take our cues from the United States. We usually come to you first. We usually push off if the Russians want to make a deal with us or the Chinese want to make a deal with us, because we'd always prefer to be working with you and take our cues from you. That's now not the case. They will openly say, like, you've been the leader for 70 years. We're not so sure you're the leader of the next, 100 years. So that's not good. When they perceive us as weak, they perceive us as not serious. But I think more importantly is, you can think whatever you want if you're, watching the situation in Ukraine, but guess who's taking notes on everything that's happening? The Chinese government. The Chinese, which are our major competitor, they're looking and they're basically saying America just doesn't have the willpower to actually defend when a democracy is invaded. That's important for us to know, because maybe we're interested in taking over territory like Taiwan. So I just think it's not just about Ukraine. It's about the signal it sends about America retreating from the world and being totally fine to cede leadership to places like Russia or China.
What do you hear when you hear an American president say, it doesn't matter what happens there, we have an ocean? I mean, the history of Pearl Harbor and 9/11 is that those oceans didn't do us much good here at home.
Yeah, I mean, look, it would be great if we lived in a world where the only threats to the U.S. homeland came from people walking right up to our borders, right? It's just look at what happens across the world on a daily basis. There are plots to kidnap and kill American citizens every single week. There are plots to attack our homeland every single week. And I think the idea that somehow we're protected by some ocean, when we just had a domestic terrorism attack, 2 of them, right around Christmas time, right, New Orleans and Las Vegas. The idea that we're somehow separated from the world when we have an incredibly connected and globalized world is just, at this point, ignorance. That's just willful ignorance. It doesn't make sense.
You've got a lot of examples of the Republicans collapsing onto themselves and ceasing to be a political party at all, let alone one with beliefs that are the same from the time the sun comes up to when it goes down. Their beliefs about Putin might be at least a temporary exception. I'm going to show you something that Senator Roger Wicker said yesterday to CNN.
Do you think that Putin can be trusted in these negotiations?
No. Putin is a war criminal and should be in jail for the rest of his life, if not executed. Vladimir Putin has violated every tenet of international law.
At least as of the time of that interview, Wicker not on board with Trump's embrace of Vladimir Putin. Do you have any back channel to Republicans or do you dare to hope that they'll stand up to Trump on the issue of Ukraine?
Well, look, we don't need a back channel. He's the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'm on that committee. I'm the most junior member. And I was traveling with him and others to Munich this past weekend. And I think it is interesting to me that today, just the sheer number of Republicans who have come out in the Senate and actually said, no, I don't think it's a good thing to cozy up to Putin. No, I don't think this leads to good places. I wish they would do that on domestic issues, right? But it is interesting to watch. And it's because they know the precedent this sets. It's because they all complained about the really bad pullout from Afghanistan and the video and images that left the world with. They know that the same thing times 10 is going to happen if we just hand over Ukraine to Putin. So it's been interesting to me. You don't need a back channel. They've said more today in the past 10 hours than they have about almost any other domestic issue. And I would love, if this was the thing that helped get them a little bit more backbone on pushing back on Donald Trump. It does not make us more safe.
What do you do then if they're going to find their spines in this news cycle? And I share your hope that they put actions behind their public statements of the last 48 hours. But what do you do with the people they've already acquiesced to having in the cabinet, people like Tulsi Gabbard?
Big, beautiful bill combining budgets with tax cuts and raising the debt ceiling. But that's not what the Senate is doing, though, right?
Yeah, Christina, the Senate had plans as soon as tomorrow to begin the process of voting on their budget resolution, which in many ways would have set up a showdown with the House over their budget plan. The Senate version is a much slimmed down version of the budget that would offer up more funding for the military and in particular would give Donald Trump immediate funding to execute his agenda as it relates to the border. But Donald Trump basically pulled the rug out from underneath him during this plan by posting on his social media platform this morning that he prefers encompassing all of his agenda items into one reconciliation package, and that would include an extension or even more tax cuts that went back to the 2017 tax cuts. Republicans just think it's going to be very difficult to pass all of those in one bill immediately, and that's why they want to get the more popular agenda items off the floor as quickly as possible. One thing, though, Christina, that is just really almost shocking still at this stage of covering Donald Trump is that John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, told us today he had no idea that Donald Trump was planning to blow this process up via his social media this morning. He said it was news to him when he saw the president's position on this. The vice president is going to join Republicans today for their Senate lunch to kind of hash out a path forward. But it's clear that the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate are not on the same page when it comes to this reconciliation package, and it is the most important agenda item for Donald Trump. Christina.
All right, Ryan Novak.
So, folks, Donald Trump is absolutely infuriating Republicans, both current GOP officials, but also historic Republicans. And look, I'm not going to romanticize Ronald Reagan. I know this is controversial, and I know some people who watch, YouTube content, some of you are like, Ronald Reagan, there's redeeming qualities. I actually do think he's one of history's greatest monsters. I think that at least if Trump had one term, Reagan would have easily been more damaging to the United States than Trump. Nonetheless, I understand why Slotkin there is weaponizing Ronald Reagan, because he still has a lot of positive recollection within the general population, especially a lot of older folks, right? And it is true, though, that Donald Trump is sort of tearing asunder the international system of global dominance the United States had, right? On the one hand, he's trying to be a bully to America's friends, like Canada, Mexico, Denmark, Greenland, Panama. But he's trying to be bestest buddies now, also Ukraine, but he's trying to be bestest buddies with Russia, Saudi Arabia, monstrous nations, right? And you could see it there. You have Republican officials turning on him, and he's not even looping in Republicans. This is what's wild about this, right? The Republicans have a trifecta, but it's like Trump isn't even trying to use it, because everything he's been doing so far, for the most part, has been through executive orders, some of which were legal, I suppose, but many of which have been illegal. He has a House and Senate, and he doesn't even want to use them because it will just slow down and expose his evil crimes. And Republicans are starting to get ticked off. Remember this, as much as a lot of them are MAGA, they still want a bit of the spotlight. They have egos too, and Trump is underestimating their pettiness.